If this winter has taught me anything, it's that we need a reliable source of heat. I've seen temperatures of -19. That's real temperature. With the wind blowing under my vehicle, you can imagine it has gotten extremely cold. The thing that has honestly saved me is my Dickinson Marine heater. It's called a Newport bulkhead-mounted diesel heater. Now originally, when I built my ambulance, I planned for that space to have a wood stove, and I had a cubic mini wood stove. The only reason why I took the wood stove out was because when the temperatures would drop really low at night, I would have to get up all the time to feed the fire. Even high quality dense oak, and it will last you 3 hours, maybe, if you're lucky. So you're up all night feeding the fire to keep the chill out of the air, and if you doze off and you don't get up, you wake up to a frozen vehicle. So what's it like living with one of these on a daily basis? Benefits of a diesel heater: it's a very dry heat. It's extremely dry. I have no mold, no mildew, no condensation on my windows in this living space, and it was negative. It was, well, not negative. I think it was 9 last night, 6 or 9 Fahrenheit here. And I have no condensation because this heat is so dry. That is a blessing when you're in an enclosed space breathing out. I was concerned about diesel smell. I've watched several videos about this, and I was concerned about the smell of diesel in my vehicle. I do not suffer from diesel smell. This is a sealed door, so when you close the door and light it, there is no smell. The only time you'll get any soot or like dust inside your cab is when you open the door to light it. The way this thing operates, there is a fire chamber. It's almost like a paint can. At the bottom, there is a small hole, and fuel very slowly comes up to that hole. Over that hole sits this, I'm gonna say it's a heat diffuser. Basically, it gets hot and it radiates heat. So you turn the stove on fully, all the way to 5, and you let it run for about a minute. And I can't stress this enough, the fire box, the chamber must be cold, stone cold. If you try to light one of these, like if the flame burns out and the box, the fire chamber is hot, you can have a poof, an explosion. So let it cool down completely. Turn it on full blast for about a minute. Take yourself a paper towel or a tissue, light the tissue, poke it down into the bottom of the fire chamber with your poker that they provide for you, and then turn the gas off. Turn it completely off. And make sure this gets down in the bottom and into the fuel, because this acts like a wick and will draw up the diesel and start slowly heating the chamber. You'll notice once the fire, which right now is down in the bottom of this burn chamber, once the fire heats up the burn chamber, it's designed to atomize the fuel. It actually takes the diesel and vaporizes it. The fire will rise up to the top of the chamber. It won't be down in it, it'll be hovering at the top of the chamber, and on very low it'll be blue. Now, the coveted blue flame, as they call it, is really a clean burning low flame, and I use that flame when it's like, 40s and high 30s, and that's enough to keep this place just perfect, just sort of, with a very small blue flame. But once you start to get that flame across the top of the burn chamber, then you can turn the fuel back on and start slowly adding fuel to the burn pot. If you turn the fuel on and leave it on, when you light it, too much fuel gets in there before the burn chamber heats up, and you have kind of like a runaway situation. So turn it on for about a minute, turn it off. Drop in your wick, let the wick do its thing, heating the burn chamber. Once the flame rises up out of the burn chamber and sits on top, there's a fire ring up there. When it sits up there on top and hovers sort of like in space, that's when you can turn the gas back on and adjust from there. Okay, next thing is these heaters come with a fan assisted flue, or it's a way for you to actually force air into the firebox and into the flue for higher settings. Now, I didn't have to use this at all until we got down into these really, really cold temperatures. But on the right side of the heater, you'll find a little switch, which is a 12 volt. You don't have to run it, but the heater will run more efficiently if you do run the fan at higher fuel settings. So there's a little switch, and there's a potentiometer, a little knob that dials the fan speed in. I, for the most part, run my fan on pretty much low, flip the switch on, and I don't flip the switch on my heater till I get above 2, and the flame will start to get really orangey, like really orange, and you'll start to see on the glass. If you ever get any soot deposited on the glass, you know you need to add some air. You just know if you're depositing soot on the glass, the fire needs air. And then the picnic table. There is a little picnic table looking diffuser that goes over the burn chamber, and that's designed for low sulfur diesel. Now, where I live in the US, everything is low sulfur diesel. The diesel kind of has a greenish sort of tinge to it, but that's not a true way to know if it's low sulfur diesel. But if you're going to burn low sulfur diesel and you buy one of these used, I would feel comfortable buying one of these used, you need to call Dickinson and order one of those diffusers that sits on top. It just helps things burn better and cleaner. I've used one on mine from day one. I love it. And you don't have to go in there and jack around with all that. You don't have to take it out and clean it. If it gets really sooty, the next time you burn the heater really clean and hot, it'll burn the soot off. Okay, the first thing you have to sort of decide when you buy this is where you're gonna put it. If you're in a bus or van, you know, your options might be limited. I had to put mine at the very back of the vehicle, right up against this back door, because that was like the best place I had for it. Put it near a location where you can get some makeup air, some air coming in. I also have a carbon monoxide detector installed. I don't want to wake up dead one night, you know, so that's a precaution. Right below the heater, I have a fire extinguisher. Those are just common sense stuff. Now the heater, it's a double layer. It's designed to be bulkhead mounted on ships, boats, working vessels. It's a very tough little heater, but it's double wall, which means the firebox is actually inside this outer shroud. So to the left and the right in the back of the heater, there isn't a lot of heat coming out, which is nice because I put it next to this window, and originally you would think, oh my goodness, it's 6 inches away from this aluminum window. You'd think the window would get scalding hot. Like with my wood stove, my Cubic Mini, it's not double walled. Yeah, the window would get very hot. I had to put a piece of shielding here. But with the Dickinson, it doesn't, because it's double walled. So all the heat rises between these two shields and up. So you have to know the heat's gonna go up, and the top part of your vehicle will be a lot warmer than the floor. So how do you combat that? Now, I got lucky. I could lie to you and tell you that I planned it like this, but I didn't plan it like this. It just happened. This is my mini split heat pump, and it is mounted right next to my wood stove, or excuse me, to my Newport heater. I run the fan on this, and it draws air in from the top. So it draws in all this hot air, and it's on low right now. You can probably hear it in the mic. I'm sorry if you can. But it draws in all that hot air and blows it through my vehicle. And as I raise the temperature on this, when it gets really cold, I run it warmer and warmer, hotter and hotter. I turn the fan up, and it blows air through the room. So you need to know that when you mount it, don't have it near, you know, combustibles like drapes or cloth type things. Would you touch it in the night if you rolled over? That was a concern of mine, because where the camera is sitting is my kitchen table and my bed. And I was worried at night that I might roll over in the night and kick my sheet or my blanket over onto the stove. Now the stove right now, I've got my arm against it, and it's stone cold. The front of it is stone cold. Now, not where the glass is hot, but this bottom part covers the valve, it's cold. So I feel safe with this stove. Let me put it that way. I feel safe with it. I feel safer with it than I do a wood stove. Okay, the next thing you need to consider when you're installing this thing is fuel. Now there are two lines that come out of this heater. One of them is a drain line. It drains excess diesel to daylight. So you will run that drain line out under your vehicle to daylight in case you have a problem. Now, mine has dripped fuel on occasion. I did have there's a needle valve. It works like a carburetor. If any of you folks are familiar with a carburetor, it's got a float, kind of like the back of a toilet. It's got a float and a needle valve. And as the float rises, it shuts the needle valve off, and as the float drops, it opens the needle valve and it fills the metering valve with fuel. If that valve doesn't close all the way due to garbage, debris in your fuel, the drain line will save you. It will dump all that diesel outside and keep your cab from flooding. So I can't stress this enough. Don't cap that line off thinking, oh, I don't need it. Run that line outside. So drain line and fuel line. Their fuel line is copper flared fittings. So if you've never worked with flared copper, this is a low pressure system. So this is not a high pressure propane type system or high pressure fuel system. The fuel coming into this heater is like 1.5 to 3 psi max. Very low pressure. Ideally, if you can gravity feed this stove, I would. I was unable to. Gravity feed means you take your fuel tank. Now I have a 6-gallon plastic fuel tank in the cabinet behind this outside. You would mount your fuel tank ever so slightly higher, like a foot higher than the stove, and then fuel runs via gravity with no pump to your stove. That's the simplest, the quietest, and the most reliable way to run this stove. That requires zero electricity. Zero. And if you did that, that's great. All you have to get your hands on is fuel. You could have no power whatsoever, and if you can get your hands on diesel, even if you have to suck it out of your own tank, you will survive and stay warm in the winter. Now, my stove is high enough and my cabinet outside is skinny enough that I tried to mount my tank up high enough to gravity feed, but then I had to stand on a ladder every time I was trying to fill my tank outside. And it wasn't comfortable or safe or good, because this heater on low will go through about 1 gallon of diesel in 24 hours on low. Now, with the weather we've been having, negative temperatures, I was going through 2 gallons of diesel a day. That's 24-hour period. I don't know if you can hear this tick. There is every 7 seconds, there's a little tick right there. That is the Dickinson Marine fuel pump. It is a very low pressure pump. Now, I've tried a different fuel pump. Don't tell Dickinson. I tried a off-brand pump. Didn't work. It was too high pressure. I had to pony up for the Dickinson pump. The Dickinson pump cost me $200 and something. Not cheap. Not cheap. I'm not going to lie to you. This whole setup is not cheap. The stove is between $750 and $900 because I have the water loop. Hidden secret, this thing heats water too. That makes it totally badass. It heats water. So you're looking at $1,000. But the thing is, if you buy one of these, you got to buy it once, and there's like nothing to go wrong with it. Besides the fuel pump, which it's so low speed and it just ticks over once every 7 seconds. It's like it's an industrial grade pump. It will last you, I bet it'll last you a decade. So well worth the money, in my opinion. One more thing when you're installing this heater is you have to have a roof penetration. I really like the Dickinson Marine roof penetration. Actually, in their case, it's what they call a deck penetration, because these are designed to be below deck and like a sailboat or a boat, and the penetration for the ceiling in the boat is actually the deck that you walk around on. So it's this very sleek, very good looking stainless piece, and that's what I have on my roof. So I would say personally stick with all Dickinson products when you're installing this. And you will need what's called a barometric dampener. That's this little guy right here. And it seems counterintuitive to have an open chimney. Like that is actually just an open flap. But what it's designed to do is we've had some pretty gnarly days of wind, and where wind will blow across the top of the chimney. Now I have an H cap, a Dickinson wind cap on it, and that helps eliminate a lot of the wind blowing down the chimney. But the barometric dampener, it evens out the draw, because when the wind blows across the top of the chimney, it can really increase the draw of air, the draft. It can really increase the draft. And with a wood stove, that's no big deal. Wood stove, because you're not really worried about an air-fuel ratio in a wood stove. But when you're trying to dial in a very small amount of fuel and the right amount of air to get your fire to burn as clean as possible with a diesel flame, you don't want these peaks of a lot of airflow and then no airflow, a lot of airflow and no airflow. So when the wind blows across the top and creates a heavy draft that the fire can't meet the demand, this opens up and allows extra air into the flue, the chimney, and prevents the fire from, going crazy. And the last thing that I would implore you to buy, I know it's more money, but they have a high temperature shutoff. It's a valve with a sensor that connects to your chimney. You adjust it, you set it, so that if this ever gets out of control, it triggers a valve that pops, and you mount that valve in your fuel line and just cuts the fuel. And you can adjust how far off your chimney you put this sensor so that it's as sensitive or as not sensitive as you decide. So you decide your comfort level. If you want to run your stove hot, like if you have a pretty big space, you can move it off a little bit and it won't trip. So yeah, I would recommend you buy one. You don't have to have one to run this, especially if you're going to always be around. If you're always going to be around, now Dickinson does recommend that when you operate one of these stoves, you're always present. I think that's a good idea too. Now, I'm not going to lie, I have gone shopping and stuff and left this stove on because I've run it for months and months and I trust it. And with my high temperature shutoff, I think there's more of a risk of having it turn off and everything freeze and have it get crazy and burn my place down. It's just my opinion. And one of the coolest features about this stove, and one of the main reasons why I chose this stove, is the water loop. There is a 1/2-inch stainless tube. It's a single turn loop at the top of the firebox. Now you don't have to run this and you don't have to buy one with a water loop, but this is my opinion. I would buy one with a water loop. I think it's $50 extra, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I have that water loop plumbed into a 6-gallon aluminum water tank. It's just a hot dog style air tank turned up on its bum, and it's plumbed into that. And this is a thermosiphon, which means that the hot water rises and there's no pump on this. So as that loop heats up, it will slowly circulate water from that tank. Now this heater actually works better when it's cold outside. I mean, when it gets really cold, that's when this heater shines. When you can sort of crank it up and get it rolling good, that's when this heater, in my opinion, really shines, because you're making more hot water. And with that 6-gallon hot water tank, I have plumbed that tank through my floor. So in that tank I have RV antifreeze, and I have radiant floor heating in my floor. Now you have to understand, this little heater will not produce enough hot water to make your floor a primary source of heat. It will not make the floor 80 or 90, but what it will do is it will prevent the floor from freezing, and it will make the floor comfortable. I'm gonna guess and say it'll make the floor 65, maybe 70 degrees, maybe. I haven't checked. That's just off the wall guess. But my floor has never froze, which if you've been in an RV in the winter, that's one of the main problems, is your floor will freeze. You'll have a bowl of dog water and the room will be 75, and you wake up and your dog's water's frozen. This prevents that. So there's many ways you can use that loop to concoct your own hot water system, but just know that this thing also heats hot water, and that's cool. So to wrap this up, what we have here is a well-built, reliable, good-looking, fairly easy to use heater. And the most important part is that it will run without electricity. To me, that sets it above the rest. The fact that if I did lose my house batteries and I couldn't plug in, or my solar decided to die on me and it was really, really cold, I could fire this up and survive. It gives me peace of mind. And you know what? Having a little fireplace like this, in my space, it makes it feel cozy, very comfortable, and dry. And it heats hot water. Yeah, it's a good heater. So, I hope all of you are safe and warm and doing well. Thank you for joining me. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'll put links to all this stuff down there. I'll catch you later.